Friends, in continuation with the post-structuralist theories, today we are going to discuss the deconstruction. The French Algerian philosopher Jacques Derrida used the term deconstruction to indicate a theoretical premise that explores how knowledge and meaning are constructed. He adapted the term deconstruction from Martin Heidegger, who used several different terms to indicate his complex and layered relationship to philosophy's past. Derrida points out that even though we typically think of language as conveying meanings, language can simultaneously convey both the presence and also the absence of meaning. That is, what a particular given statement tries not to say may be as important as what it does say. Deconstruction starts from the idea that there is no objective, universal way to achieve knowledge or to claim truth. In 1967, Derrida laid out his ideas with the publication of three important books: Speech and Phenomena, Writing and Difference, and on Grammatology. Like other post-structuralists, Derrida challenges the metaphysical certainty that the speaking subject puts forth a consistent, intentional, and rational point of view, and a unified meaning that directly refers to some pre-existent reality. Derrida challenged the binary oppositions, nature against culture or man against woman, that are accepted as customary and foundational in the given context. By examining these basic structures of the argument, Derrida exposes them as human constructions rather than the essential truths they pretend to be. The reading must always aim at a certain relationship, unperceived by the writer, between what he commands and what he does not command of the patterns of the language that he uses. We can then ask what these constructs were put into play in the first place. Why might a text construct culture as superior to nature, or men as superior to women? What is the author choosing a certain sense of priority of certain ideas over the other? The most fundamental sense, deconstruction, is a display the operation of logocentrism in any text where the meaning of text is broadened to include not merely written treatises in a variety of disciplines, but the entire range of their political, theological, social and intellectual context, as manifested primarily in the use of language. Logocentrism is etymologically and historically, this term refers to any system of thought which is founded on the stability and authority of the Logos, the divine word. The various meanings accumulated by this word in the Hebrew, ancient pagan and early Christian words are complex. Logos is both a thought and a word, and the two are inseparable. The Logos is the word as determined by and conveying a meaning. The word and the concept logos may have derived in part from the Greek thinker Heraclitus and the Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria. In its simplest meaning, it can signify statement, saying, or discourse, or even science. In its ancient Greek philosophical and Judeo-Christian meaning, then the Logos referred both to the Word of God which created the universe and to the rational order of creation itself. In other words, it is in the spoken Logos that language and reality ultimately coincide. in an identity that is invested with absolute authority, absolute origin, and absolute purpose of teleology. It is clear that one of the functions of the Logos is to preserve the stability and closure of the entire system. The notion of language that is thereby reinstituted by deconstruction is partly influenced by sociology. It is a notion of language as a system of relations. The terms which are related have no semantic value outside the network of relations in which they subsist. They depend on these relations for their meaning and significance. Also implicit in this view of language is the arbitrary and conventional nature of the sign. There is no natural connection between the sign table and an actual table in the world. Equally arbitrary and conventional is the connection between the signifier table and the concept of a table to which it points. Derrida attributes the name of metaphor to this endless substitution of one signifier to another. In describing or attempting to understand our world, we can no longer use literal language, that is, language that actually describes the object or reality. We can only use metaphor. Hence, language in its very nature is metaphorical. Hence, there cannot be a sharp distinction between, say, the spheres of philosophy and science, on one hand, which are often presumed to use a literal language based on reason, and literature and arts, on the other hand, which are characterized as using metaphorical and figurative language. The restitutions on the truth in Point Shear, 1978, is a good example of deconstructive methodology. In The Origin of the Work of Art, 1935, German philosopher Martin Heidegger tries to understand or to uncover the nature of essence of art. Knowing the nature of art would unravel why we do it. Defining the origin of art can thus clarify the dichotomy of the artist-artwork relationship. To Heidegger, artwork was not only a representation of the environment, but actually influenced the creation of the environment. Culture and the meaning of existence, therefore, change when artwork is introduced. Heidegger viewed the source of an artwork as unrecognizable, as both an artist and an artwork are determined by the art. Therefore, art has already influenced the creation of another art. He described art as being a condition of culture, but also cultures as being influenced by art. According to Heidegger, an artist creates an artwork and an artwork creates an artist. Art is a provider of both artwork and artist, and the force of art controls these two elements. The real nature of an artwork can only be realized by understanding the meaning of art, or vice versa. Heidegger concludes that to avoid becoming misled in this cycle, one must either define the essence of art or of the artwork. He maintained that it will be an easier feat to define essence of the artwork, and turns to a painting by Van Gogh to provide an example. Heidegger first found it necessary to his argument to define thing, which he determined can be interpreted in three different ways. Things can be substances with properties or barest of traits. Things can be the manifold or sense perceptions. Things can be formal matters. The last definition of thing relates to Heidegger's interpretations of a particular Van Gogh painting, as it includes the idea that a thing is a piece of equipment. He used the painting A Pair of Shoes, done in 1886 by Vincent van Gogh, to illustrate his point. The painting allows for a distinction between artwork and other things. like equipment. The equipmental being of equipment can be understood by viewing this painting as it permits viewers to be transported to a different place. This is because the artwork knows the truth of the subject, the shoes, and therefore must understand the truth of equipment. Viewers can grasp this truth because the artwork allows viewers to deepen the essence of themselves. Heidegger believed that the Van Gogh's paintings depicts a peasant woman's pair of shoes, worn and tattered by the long days spent toiling in the fields. This is the narrative of a peasant life. However, 3 decades after Heidegger published this essay, art historian Meir Shapiro theorized that the painting describes a narrative of the artist himself. In his essay, The Still Life as a Personal Object, a note on Heidegger and Van Gogh, 1968, Meir Shapiro disagreed with Heidegger. He believed that Heidegger's interpretation of Van Gogh's artwork was a self-created construction. Shapiro's explained that the truth is historical and maintained that the shoes are not those of a peasant woman but those of a city man, the shoes of Van Gogh himself. Although Van Gogh is known for his painting representing peasant life, Shapiro argued that the peasant shoes of Van Gogh's paintings are depicted in a well-kept condition which affords dignity to the peasant. He insisted it is only his shoes which he painted as tattered and well-worn. Therefore, to Shapiro, the painting does not provide the essence of the truth. The shoes actually represent Van Gogh himself, as they are those of a traveling city man and most likely the pair he wore in Holland in 1885. Shapiro believed that Heidegger failed to recognize the presence of the artist in the artwork, for it is inevitable that a piece of the artist is retained in his own artwork. Whereas Heidegger based his theory solely on the perceptible quality of the physicality of the painting. Shapiro considered that a still life is a personal object and possesses meanings outside of its physicality alone. Jacques Derrida, in Restitution of the Truth in Pointing in 1987, believed that neither Heidegger nor Shapiro possessed solid visual argument in the aforementioned essay. He stated that the shoes are not even a pair and cannot be proven to be those of a peasant nor a city dweller. Derrida questioned what constitutes a pair of shoes and how the elements of such combine different forms of reality. This deconstructionist approach faces reconfiguration of the subject matter to study that which becomes visible underneath and between once the factors are rearranged, perhaps. A post-structuralist theory such as this finds limits in the theories and attempts to probe further by reconstituting the important aspect of these theories and elucidating that which lies at the foundation. To Derrida, the entryway to the mode of thought is crucial to understanding the center or meaning which is sought. Without one, the other does not exist, and understanding the former allows for the understanding of the latter. In this way, Derrida determined that Heidegger is ultimately more correct in his argument than Shapiro, although Heidegger did not present it suitably. Derrida supposed that the interpretation of a pair of shoes by Heidegger and Shapiro point to their respective standpoint rather than to the artwork itself, as Shapiro himself was a city dweller and Heidegger supported the peasant ideology. Shapiro, Derrida held, was overly attached to representational thinking, thereby weakening his argument. To Derrida, it is more important to understand that which surrounds the artwork rather than the essence or nature of the artwork. Derrida offered a highly credible argument. He proposed that both theories utilized by Heidegger and Shapiro were limited and therefore not fully attaining a truth. Each scholar, critic and collector has a lexicon of signs and symbols to draw upon and contend with which do not necessarily corroborate with the iconology of the artist. It is crucial to understand that form and context are not the only factors at work when examining art. The scholars themselves possess conscious and unconscious biases which affect how they interpret art. Derrida argued that when examining art, one must take a self-critical stance and incorporate many avenues of exploration. A combination of the careful deconstructionist methodology and an objective lens which allows for a true comprehension of art.